Welcome to Talking Theatre, your look at what's happening in the Ottawa theatre scene. We've got two fantastic people today, two good friends. Mary Ellis, who's directing the play, and Mr. David Frisch, who's got a fantastic role in the play and is also the producer of Same Day Theatre. Thank you very much for being here. Well, this is one of my favorite plays from one of my favorite series by one of my favorite playwrights involving some of my favorite people. Okay,
Awesome.
so I'd like to know, first of all, tell us a little bit about, for those who are not familiar with End of Civilization, tell us a little bit about George F. Walker and a little bit about this play. So we'll start with, you're the director, Mary, why don't you start us off?
Sure. The End of Civilization is one play in a series called Suburban Motel by George F. Walker. The End of Civilization deals with a man by the name of Henry Cape, the role that David is playing, and his wife Lily. Henry has been out of work for 2 years. He was presumably in a kind of middle management job. They've come to stay in the motel room so he can be closer to where he would look for more work. He's been looking closer to home for 2 years. Now he's come to look in the big city. Along the way, we meet two detectives, and we also meet their next door neighbor, who is a prostitute. And there's also this element of a kind of murder mystery to it, because there's a serial killer out there. We have 3 bodies at one point, and the cops are trying to discover who the murderer is.
Now I feel a little bad about chuckling through all of that because it sounds like just a terrible, terrible premise. But Walker is very funny. You're playing Henry, I think one of the most iconic characters in Canadian theatre. Can you tell us a little bit about if you think there is any humor in this play?
I think there is a lot of humor, and it's one of the things that marks Walker as a great playwright and makes the story bearable for an audience, because not that there's anything wrong with presenting a situation, people in dire circumstances. In fact, if you can't do that, then you don't really have a play. But we also need to laugh because that's what happens in real life. One of my favorite bits is early on in Henry and Lily's tenure in this motel room, the day they arrive. They're arguing over, she says we should have got a room with a cook stove. And he said, no, that's a certain limit where there are certain things we can't do. Cooking in the room is depressing. And they argue back and forth. We don't have the money. He's saying we can afford to eat in restaurants for a week until we sort this out. Pause. She goes to the phone. He goes, you calling your sister? She says, yeah. He says, wait until after 11 when the rates go down. And we've all been there, right? We've all done, watched our pennies on one thing and been a spendthrift on the other and criticized or been criticized for doing that.
Exactly.
And I think that's what makes this such a great play, is he's got an amazing ear for the absurdity of it, the heartbreak of it. I mean, Henry and Lily say the kinds of things that people say to each other when they're shortly before the marriage breaks up, or that make you question whether you can continue with someone. And it's like he ran a tape recorder in somebody's apartment or something.
Well, he's been described by some people as, the David Mamet of Canada in some ways in terms of that language. Mary, you've been doing Walker for years, and I know you've done tons at GCTC all over the place. And maybe for people who aren't familiar with the Walker style, what would an audience come to expect? What will they see when they actually get in the theater? What's the style of the play?
It's dark comedy. It's because it's ordinary people pushed to extreme measures, pushed to desperation. And unfortunately, there is comedy in that. But Walker's stamp is that it is always very, very dark, but very, very funny. But he's also capable of moving us. I mean, I like to describe it as he can literally have me laughing one moment and on the verge of tears the next moment. The other thing about Walker, which I love, is his social conscience. And all of his characters tend to be people who are living on the edge for some reason, whether because of mental illness, addiction, poverty, dire straits of some kind. And he's got a real sense of the downtrodden, the lost, the unfortunate. I read a quote from him once that said, he said, "I don't tend to put professionals in my plays." And I think that's one of the things I love about him, is that he gives a voice to these people who we don't normally see on stage.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I think that's different about this one is that he expands that circle a little wider to the people who are one step or two steps away from being colleagues with the usual Walker characters.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that like in the great Clifford Odets plays of the 1930s, you realize it's really only a couple of steps that separate some of us from living on the street or living in a nice neighborhood. And it doesn't take that many things to go wrong.
Yeah.
And when the system, like Mary says about his social conscience, this play's about where the system breaks down.
Yeah.
Where the the kinds of mass layoffs that this city, that Ottawa, has faced in the last 10 and 15 years. If you know anybody from Nortel, if you know anybody from an organization called the federal government.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And that you can't throw that many people out of work and not expect that something's going to echo back.
Yeah.
And this play is a lot about how it does echo back.
Yeah.
Why do you think Ottawa needs to see this show?
Oh, it's George F. Walker. It's funny, it's moving, it's absolutely contemporary in the sense of, the economy is in the toilet, basically. I think there's something about this play that just about everybody could relate to. It's highly entertaining, it's mysterious, it's disturbing in places, it's hilariously funny, it's a great script, it's a great cast. What more can I say? Come and see George F. Walker's The End of Civilization, running May 13th to the 31st at the Gladstone Theatre.